How is everybody doing tonight? Good? All right, so we are going to talk a little bit about Labcon, and specifically how we have looked at the upstream processes of making plastic devices. And so I realized, like, you're looking at me and thinking Darth Vader music should be playing because, like, this is literally the wrong audience for this talk, and I totally get that, and you are totally right. But I think that's actually a really important point here because we can actually get at a lot of the real facts about what you can do when you still have to use plastic. So sort of like Allison's talk, but also a little bit different from Allison's talk. And I think that both of those points of view are really important when it talks about life science. So real quick intro, Labcon right up the street in Petaluma. I worked in the lab this morning, came down here, a nice 45-minute drive, came right down here. We have been around for about 60 years. We make 1,000 different products, most of them from plastic. We mold, package, and sterilize right here in the USA. We export to 52 countries. We have an on-site lab, that's me. And we have 260 employees worldwide. And we've won a lot of awards, and we've done a lot of really good things. So I just wanted to highlight a few of these. We put on this giant solar array. We are a green power partner of the EPA back when the EPA was good. We are switched to the Sonoma Clean Power, a nonprofit electricity provider. And finally, we won the California Product Stewardship Golden Arrow Award, which is a pretty big deal. So, I put up all those awards. And it occurred to me when I was looking at this talk and sort of finished this talk, I was like, this talk is sort of like a dating profile. So you're going to get all this good stuff, and like, wow, Labcon is cute. And then I'm going to show you some bad stuff, because that's what dating is like. And then you're going to have to decide, is it mostly good, and is the bad worthwhile? Okay, so I just showed you a bunch of awards we won, and a bunch of good things we've done, but you know, we're still a plastics company. So here's our super hot photo on vacation. Here's what we've done since 2000. We've gone down in waste, we've gone down in energy use, we've gone up in renewable energy by a lot, we've gone down in water use, that's a big deal in California, and we've gone way down in greenhouse gas amounts per case. So again, you're getting interested. This is our super hot photo. And now we have to talk about our issues. And it really, I think our issues come from the fact, and it's an incontrovertible thing in science right now, plastic is a huge part of modern biology and chemistry and clinical research. And while we should absolutely move towards not using plastic, right now that is true. We use a lot of plastic, right? And so I think what we really want you to get out of this talk is what are the things you can do that involve plastic currently, all the auxiliary stuff that you can improve. And so, like, this is a true fact. We are a part of that industry. We make 5 million pieces of plastic a day when we are really rolling. Here's the thing. If we don't make it, someone else currently is going to make it, right? And we are as good as you can possibly get and still be making biotech plastic. Again, remember, we're still super hot, okay? So keep that in mind as we talk about this plastic. So a couple things thinking about sustainability. The first thing we do, this is literally my one commercial slide, sort of like the Super Bowl. This is my one commercial slide. So like one of the things we think about when we do sustainable stuff is you can buy crappy plastic. That is absolutely true, and it's going to be cheap, and it might mess up your experiments. Part of sustainability is you want to build things that work, okay? And so we test, and we test, and we test, and we use good commodity resins, and we do E-beam sterilization to a sterility assurance level of 10 to the minus 6, which leads the industry. We put a whole bunch of environmentally sustainable formats to deliver plastic, which is part of our industry. We are certified free of biologicals. We do more testing than anyone on Earth. And we have, I was trying to pick one thing that will impress everyone. We have the industry-leading spin rate in the entire country. So if you have a centrifuge tube from us, it's going to be able to spin faster than anyone else's. So those are all really good things. And really, that's part of sustainability, right? Your thing has to work, because if a thing breaks, it messes up an experiment, and you have to go get another tube. And that is way less sustainable than having it work the first time. So we did a whole bunch of environmental things, and we were thinking about how do we show this? There's a lot of greenwashing in our industry. You are going to see lots of marketing from lots of different companies that say, we are sustainable, we planted a tree in 1993, therefore we're fine. And so, I don't know, from my perspective, we've done a lot of really good things that cost us a lot of money and cost us a lot of time and made us actually green. And we were trying to figure out how do we get that across in an independent way. And so we actually paired with My Green Lab, and we joined the Act the Label program. And so I'm going to talk a little bit in this talk about what the ACT label is, and I was trying to like figure out how to frame this talk so you guys would be interested not just in plastic, but also how green we are. So I'm gonna kind of jump back and forth, and I'm gonna walk through our examples of what we did and how it fit into the ACT label and how we got the scores that we got, because that really helps to explain how the ACT label works. And again, I wanna be clear, we did a lot of this stuff and it fit into the ACT label. We didn't do it for the ACT label, but we really liked our numbers that came out of it. So again, as Allison said, the ACT label is essentially a nutrition label. So it looks at all these different components. You don't have to just look at marketing literature that says, we are doing the best we can. You can actually look at numbers, and those numbers are gonna say, okay, we're gonna look at manufacturing and all the different components of manufacturing. We're gonna look at user impact. What does the user actually do with the device? And we're gonna look at the end of life. What happens when the device is used up and done? What can we do with it? And we're really looking at all these different aspects of things and getting independent scores, not just us, lots of companies, for the ACT label. And if you add up all those different components, you're gonna get what's called the environmental impact factor, or the EIF. So if you're lazy or busy, and I know scientists are both, because I'm one of them, you're gonna look for one number, and that one number is gonna say, well, this is good, and this one's a little worse, so I should buy the good one, okay? So if you get nothing else out of this, think about the EIF, the environmental impact factor, and that can give you an actual number. This actually came, again, from scientists, sustainability directors, procurement specialists, manufacturers, all provided the framework for this thing. So these numbers are not just made-up numbers. These numbers actually have some real scientific backing. And especially important, this is actually getting implemented into a lot of different procurement platforms. So a lot of different groups, a lot of different academic groups, a lot of different companies are starting to use the ACT label as part of their procurement process. And that was another reason we wanted to fit into this, because again, this is a way to show exactly who we are and what we've done. Another thing to take home, this gets a little confusing sometimes. The lower the number, the better it is. So the lesser the impact, that means a low number. So again, in this talk, we're gonna look at some of our ACT scores for different products, but really what I want you to get at is, why do we have that number? Why did that number come up, and what is all the background behind that specific number? Okay, so let's pick a product. I'm gonna start down at the bottom of the label, right? So just above the EIF, and we're gonna look at the end-of-life product number. And again, these are scaled generally on a scale of 1 to 10. And I actually started here because it's a bad number. It's 8, trying to be honest here, right? Again, we are a polypropylene manufacturer generally. And polypropylene, it has to be a virgin polypropylene. It can't be a recycled polypropylene for actual liquid contact, right? That is part of our industry, okay? Also, perhaps you've heard, it's really hard to recycle polypropylene right now, okay? But we've done all we can, right? In this case, we've labeled everything possible with recycling code. You can sort of see the recycling code on our tube. So in those instances, when you can recycle polypropylene or HDP or different components, we've actually given people the option to do that. How about end of life? All right, so here we have an end of life score of 4.1, and specifically this is because what happens at the end of using that product? Well, a lot of our packaging is cardboard. Cardboard could, of course, be readily recycled, and we actually clearly label it with recycling codes. And it's funny, if you go and look at the labware you get and the packaging it comes in, that is surprisingly not true for a lot of different things that get delivered to your lab. You should go look for scores. You should go look for the actual codes and what's on there. We do that on everything we possibly can. Because really we want to give customers, you guys, the option of good behavior, right? Not everyone is going to be good. We get that. But we want to give people the option of being good, and the only way we can give you the option is to give you the actual number to tell you what the actual material is, right? So products are clearly labeled with recycling codes. We also, no one's going to pull a sticker off a piece of polypropylene and put the polypropylene there and put the little piece of sticker paper. And no one's doing that. We know that, okay? So we actually made sure that our labels match the same material. So if it's plastic, it's a plastic label. If it's paper, it's a paper label. So we're trying to get all the friction out of doing that so you can just toss the whole thing into recycling to potentially be recycled. So we make all our packaging from pre-consumer recycled plastic or recycled paper. Other thing Labcon does really well. You can actually go to our website. We might have some in the back actually at our table as well. We actually give you a recycling guide for all our different products, right? So we say, okay, these products are made of this thing and this thing. Here's the recycling codes. Here's what you can do with them. Because again, we want to give you guys the option of good behavior. All right, so let's keep moving up the ACT label. So user impact lifetime rating. All right, so lifetime rating is a little bit complicated because again, we're polypropylene. Labcon tips are made for one-time use. Now, can you pipette up and down several dozen times when you're mixing something? Of course, yes, they're tips, right? But generally speaking, tips are sold as a one-time use thing, right? But there are different components that come with that tip. So the refill system that Allison was talking about, which we totally have standing up on our table back there, that yellow thing, back there, you can actually you can load tips, you can load racks. You can actually use those racks multiple times. And you can use that reload device multiple times. So we didn't get the worst score possible because, again, we've tried to set up a system where we're actually able to reuse certain components. We were, I believe, actually the first company to do this, to come up with a refill system. What I really like about the refill system is it kind of gets at the greenwashing issue a little bit. So I'm not here to name other names. There are other companies that make things that, in theory, look more recyclable. They come in a clear plastic rack, and that looks good. But if you went to the Genentech Single-Use Plastic Summit, you found out Genentech hates that because A, the plastic's actually not particularly recyclable, and it's like a single-use thing. So it looks recyclable, but it's not really recyclable, and it looks sustainable because it's clear, and the human brain thinks clear is more recyclable. I don't know why that's true, but it totally is true. But it's not true, right? It's not that green. So we actually make these boring racks that you've seen since you were a freshman in college, right, that get loaded with tips. But those racks can get autoclaved 10 times is totally an under-exaggeration. You can autoclave those 50 times. They're going to work. We've done that study, okay? So you can reload that. And when you do this and you use this system, you actually end up getting rid of like nearly 90% of the plastic that would come if you were buying individual racks. So it's an actual solution, but it looks boring, right? It's not clear. It doesn't look sexy, but it actually reduces all that plastic. Tubes actually have a kind of different lifetime rating. So the lifetime rating for the tubes, for example, the super clear tube from Labcon has a rating of 5. So yes, it's a one-time use tube, but we wanted to give people the option of using these tubes in freezers for a really long time or for storage for a really long time. So we did a bunch of experiments that show, at minimum, you can keep things in tubes in the freezer for 4 years. I'm totally not saying this on the record, but it might be infinite, right? We've never really hit a I'm not saying that. Don't do that. Don't put your tubes in the freezer forever, but you get the idea. But we've actually done a study to show that there's actually a long lifetime for these tubes, okay? And so in that case, we got a score of 5. Just so you guys understand, the label doesn't really relate to Labcon, but energy and water consumption, you don't use up water when you're using a tube or tip. You don't use electricity. That would be cool, but you don't use electricity when you're using a tube or a tip, and so those are not applicable. So let's move up to packaging content for manufacturing. All right, so packaging content, I've picked a couple different products here. So in this particular product, there's 68% recycled content, and so we have a really good packaging score, as low as you can possibly get. Packaging content for tubes actually illustrates a different way to approach packaging. Okay, so the boxes that we ship them to, they have to come in boxes, that we ship you to, come with 46% recycled content, and counterintuitively a little bit, that plastic rack that they come in is also a pretty good sustainable option. Why? So first, you can use it a ton of times, right? You can autoclave it a ton of times. It works, but also, it is actually made out of all the extra plastic that comes when you make other tips, okay? So I'm not gonna get into how molding works, but let's just say when you mold tips, there's a bunch of extra plastic that sometimes gets produced. They're called runners. Many companies throw these runners away because plastic is pretty close to free when we buy it per pound. It's a lot more economical to just toss it and use new virgin plastic. We don't do that. We actually recover all that plastic. We regrind it, and we make it into things that are a little bit more flexible in their dimensions, like racks, okay? We've actually gotten so good that we sometimes run out of the extra already run once regrind plastic, right? We basically can't make enough crappy extra plastic to make the things that we make out of crappy extra plastic, okay? That's happened a couple times. And you can see from our numbers, again, these are real numbers, we have reduced the amount of waste we have by a ton, right? All of those different tonnages, we're 5 times bigger than we were in 2000. We've gotten rid of all that, and if you actually look at the end, like per case, it's gone way, way down. Again, we almost can't produce enough waste to be green. That's kind of counterintuitive, I realize. Okay, so moving back up, product content. Again, tips are polypropylene, have to be made of virgin plastic. There's no way around that legally. We actually use regrind to make some of the parts that come in racks, these little platforms that come in there. Up to 23% of the total weight of the product is actually this reground pre-consumer plastic. So we have a score of 5. That's pretty good for polypropylene. Shipping impact. Okay, so this is big, and I'm going to wag my finger at UCSF just a little bit, okay? So 90% of products that we make are molded, assembled, packaged, and sterilized in wine country. You can see it if you get in the tallest building, right? That's not true, but it's close. And this actually matters. Like, Local is an important part of carbon dioxide. If you're if you're making things in America, shipping them to Mexico for packaging, shipping them back to another part of America for sterilization, shipping them to a warehouse and then shipping them to a lab, look, you can make your tubes a little thinner or a little thicker, you can reduce the plastic. None of that's gonna matter because you just ship between like multiple countries. We don't do that. So we actually have our sterilization facility basically like around the corner from our actual warehouse. We put in an E-beam facility. This is a huge amount of CO2 that's been taken out of the process. And I was talking to a couple of the Living Green people here, the Office of Sustainability. Currently, UCSF does not consider that as, that's still real CO2. It still exists, right? And so that's something to think about, like where do you want to get your plastic from? You want to get it for something that gets rid of all that extra CO2. We're right up the street, you guys. We'll take you wine tasting if you want to come see. It's fun. We also use E-beam. E-beam is better because E-beam is not actually radioactive. It's just an electron gun. We're building potentially a solar-powered E-beam facility that's going to power this E-beam facility. We'll see if that happens soon, we hope. Moving right up the label, responsible chemical management. We don't contain any additives that are mutagens, carcinogens, or reproductive toxins. We've checked. We only source really good, high-quality, medical-grade plastic. Resin, plastic resins, you can use cheap plastics and you can save a nickel a pound, and we know that plenty of companies do that. Our resins have, oh God, there's so much paperwork that comes with plastic now, you wouldn't even believe it. Our resins are USP 88, USP 6 certified, FDA regulations, CFR 21 compliant, BSC, TSC, FDA approved for food contact, free of ROHSs, REACHs, and substances of very high concern. There's a lot of things that have to go with good quality plastic, and that costs a little bit more, right? But you guys should totally buy things made of those plastics because they won't actually affect your experiments. Almost up to the top of the label, renewable energy. This does not mean we plugged an iPhone into a hamster wheel. We actually do much better than that. We have a massive solar facility in beautiful sunny Sonoma. We actually get 61% of ours from renewable, so we get 30% from our solar facility. We actually sell electricity back to the grid in midday when it's really sunny. We also work with Sonoma Clean Power for an extra 31%. That is a huge amount of renewable energy. Renewable energy can be kind of boring to talk about and kind of hard to frame because you see things like this a lot, like, oh, that's equal to blank number of trees, or it's this much less crude oil, or it's this much coal that we didn't burn. Those are cool, but like it's kind of an esoteric thing to think about. So we've been thinking about what's meaningful, like how do you get this down to a scale you can think about? All right, so if you buy a Labcon rack of tubes, you save the carbon dioxide that would power a propane lantern for 2.5 hours. Let me say it in a different way. If you buy a different rack from a different manufacturer, you're buying those tubes and you need to flip on a propane lamp for 2.5 hours, right? That's what you're getting when you buy a different tube. So again, something that's actually a real thing, you've actually saved carbon dioxide. This is my favorite one. We've had internal arguments about putting this stat out there because it seems impossible. We've done the math 2,000 times. It is correct. Every single tube that Labcon makes with this renewable energy, which again is a ton of renewable energy, saves you the equivalent of charging 1.7 smartphones. Every tube! That's a lot of carbon. Finally, finishing up on manufacturing impact reduction. This is one number on this big nutrition label, but it's actually an enormously complex number. The math behind it is beyond me, actually, but we gave them the data. So it shows a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and water and energy and waste. It's a number that all gets put together into this one number. We've reduced our water massively, as you can see. We switched to electric molding machines, which saved a ton of electricity. We also improved our air compressor in our facility. We also have EV charging. And in the end, we want to keep track of our victories because we're a plastics manufacturer and we want to feel a little better about being as good as you can be for a plastics manufacturer. So we actually track our total emissions. Okay, so if you go back to 2000, we were putting out that much CO2. We're 5 times bigger in 2018, and we're producing that much CO2. And actually, we've gotten a lot more efficient, too. If you look at the amount of CO2 per case, we're 17 times less than we were when we started this project, okay? Again, at this point, unfortunately, we have to deal with plastic in the industry, and this is a way to ameliorate a lot of that effect. The ACT label has been great to work with. Allison's been great to work with. Andy Bevan has also been great to work with. We actually have 107 different products that have gone through this enormously complicated process. I was on the phone for probably 36 hours trying to get this. Andy and I know each other extremely well at this point. Our ACT scores range from 30.6 to 36.2. I realize without context that number, those are good numbers. Those are really good numbers, actually. We're very proud of those numbers. You can get those scores by going right to the My Green Lab webpage. We also have links through them from labcon.com. We also list the ACT certification on all the different products that have gone through this process when you download the certificate that comes with it. Again, so it's a way to be really transparent and actually be honest about what we are. I think that's the best part of the ACT label. So as Allison said, you can actually take different products. I've taken slightly different ones at this point, but you can take different products from different manufacturers, same manufacturer, and you can look at them and you can say, okay, this is something that's been audited. This is something that's independent. It's not just, we have a great marketing department, but it's not our marketing department fooling you. These are actual numbers, okay? And you can compare different products. I also will say, I think the best part about ACT is that, yeah, our scores are better than some competitor at this point, but it also will push the entire industry in the right direction, right? We actually want everyone to have good scores because it really helps. But for now, you can pick things with the best scores, which currently is us. And I'll finish up with our hot dating slide. Thank you so much.